I'm Maya Collins, and I'm 32 years old. Last Christmas Eve, my stepmother stood in front of 40 guests at the Riverside Country Club and told everyone I was too unstable to handle my late father's estate because I'd asked why his vintage Steinway piano was suddenly listed for sale. The room went silent. I felt my hands go numb, but I looked her straight in the eye, smiled, and said, "Interesting." The next morning, she called my phone 17 times. I didn't answer once. Instead, I walked into the law offices of Chen and Associates on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, carrying a leather folder I'd kept hidden in my freezer for 8 months. The partner who met me, Susan Chen, opened the folder, read exactly 3 pages, and said softly, "Oh, honey, they have no idea what's coming, do they?" Before I tell you what was in that folder, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story genuinely speaks to you, and drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, let me take you back to April, the day my father died. My father, Dr. Marcus Collins, passed away on a Thursday afternoon at Emory University Hospital. He was 71. I got the call from my stepmother at 2:47 p.m. I drove to the hospital crying so hard I had to pull over twice. When I arrived, Vivian was in the waiting room surrounded by her book club friends. My half-brother Julian was beside her, 28, MBA from Wharton, wearing a navy suit. His hand was on Vivian's shoulder. I stood near the vending machines, alone. The last time I'd seen my father, really seen him, was 3 weeks earlier at his house in Buckhead. He'd asked me to come by after my last lesson. We'd sat in his study, the one with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the Steinway grand piano near the window, the one he'd bought in 1983, the year I was born. "Maya," he'd said, his voice quieter than usual, almost fragile. "I need you to know I've made arrangements. You won't have to worry." I hadn't understood what he meant. Not then. At the funeral 3 days later, the church was old Atlanta money. Julian gave the eulogy, speaking for 14 minutes about legacy and business. He mentioned me once. And of course, Dad loved music. He always supported Maya's hobbies. Hobbies. The word landed like a slap. Afterward, Vivian leaned in and said, "Maya's very dedicated to her little students. It's sweet, really. Marcus always worried she'd never find something sustainable." I felt heat crawl up my neck. I was turning to leave when an older woman approached me, carrying a burgundy leather briefcase. She handed me a business card. "Your father spoke about you often. He was very proud. I'll be in touch soon." That woman was Susan Chen. That evening, 23 of us gathered at my father's house for dinner, a white brick Georgian on West Paces Ferry Road. Vivienne had redecorated everything after marrying my father, erasing every trace of my mother. The dining room table was set with Limoges china and Chateau Margaux. Vivienne sat at the head, my father's seat. "Marcus left very clear instructions," she announced. "The estate will be managed carefully. Maya, you don't need to concern yourself with complicated financial matters. Music is your strength, not business." I set my fork down. Dad told me he'd made arrangements. For me. She smiled coldly. "Your father was on a lot of medication at the end, sweetheart. Don't hold on to promises he couldn't have meant." He was coherent. "This is neither the time nor the place. Let's not make a scene." I excused myself and went upstairs to my old room, now painted taupe, all my things gone. I sat at the window seat and opened the drawer beneath the cushion. Inside was a manila envelope, my name on the front in Dad's shaky handwriting. I opened it slowly, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Inside were 3 things. The first was a letter, handwritten on his personal stationery, the cream-colored kind with his initials embossed at the top. The second was a photocopy of what looked like a trust document, maybe 5 pages, with sections highlighted in yellow. The third was a key, small brass, with a number stamped on it, 307. I read the letter with tears blurring the words. "Maya, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. and Vivian is already doing exactly what I knew she would do. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better while I was alive. I tried. But men my age, we make mistakes. We marry the wrong people. We prioritize the wrong things. I won't make excuses, but I did make plans. The trust document you're holding is incomplete, just a copy. Not enough to use as evidence, but it's enough for you to know I'm telling the truth. The original is with my attorney, Susan Chen. Her office is on Peachtree Street. The key is for a safe deposit box at SunTrust Bank on Piedmont, Box 307. Inside, you'll find everything you need: proof, documentation, evidence that can't be argued away. Don't show this letter to anyone. Not Vivian, not Julian, not even Grace. Wait, Susan will know when the time is right. You are my daughter, Maya, my only daughter. The only person in this family who ever understood that music isn't just sound. It's the language we use when words aren't enough. Don't let them silence you. I love you. I'm sorry, and I'm so proud of you. Dad. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest, sobbing so hard the window seat shook. The photocopy was incomplete. The key was mysterious. I had no idea what Susan Chen looked like beyond a business card. And my father had been in the ground for less than 72 hours. But for the first time since the phone call, I felt something besides grief. I felt rage, and I felt seen. I drove back to my apartment in Decatur the next morning. No one called. My apartment was small, 600 square feet with a secondhand piano and sheet music everywhere. The first thing I did was hide the envelope in my freezer, wrapped in foil. The second thing I did was call Susan Chen. Chen and Associates, how may I help you? My name is Maya Collins. My father was Marcus Collins. He passed away last week. Oh, Miss Collins. Ms. Chen has been expecting your call. Can you come in tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I blinked. She's been expecting me? Yes, ma'am. Your father briefed her thoroughly. My father had planned this. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Chen and Associates on the 14th floor of a sleek building on Peachtree Street. The receptionist smiled warmly and led me into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown Atlanta. Susan Chen stood up from behind a mahogany desk. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'3", with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Maya, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I'm so glad you came. Please sit. I sat. My hands were sweating. Ms. Chen, I don't understand what's happening. My father left me a letter and a key and you want to know if it's real. She finished. It is. Your father came to me 8 months ago. He was very clear about what he wanted and very aware that Vivian would contest it. So we built something airtight. She opened a file on her desk and slid a document across to me. The header read, Irrevocable Trust Agreement. Marcus A. Collins, grantor. Halfway down the first page, in bold letters, it said, Primary Beneficiary, Maya Elizabeth Collins. I stared at the words. What does this mean? It means, Susan said carefully, that your father set aside the majority of his personal assets for you, not the business. Julian gets Collins Financial Group. That was always going to him. But the house, the piano, the investment accounts, the art collection, and a cash trust worth approximately $1.2 million. All of it. Protected, irrevocable. Vivian can't touch it. My throat closed. She told me there was nothing. She said, she lied. Susan's voice was calm, factual, and she'll keep lying until the will is read publicly, which is happening next Tuesday at 10 a.m. in the presence of a probate judge at the Fulton County Courthouse. I'll be there. You should be there too. I walked out of that office in a daze. I don't remember getting to my car. I don't remember driving home. I just remember sitting in my apartment staring at the wall thinking, Dad knew. He knew Vivian would erase me. He knew Julian would go along with it, and he'd spent the last months of his life building a legal fortress around me. in silence. That week, I didn't tell anyone. Not my Aunt Grace, not my best friend Simone, not even my landlord when he asked why I looked so pale. I went to work, taught lessons, smiled at my students, and came home to my tiny apartment and cried until I couldn't breathe. On Monday night, the night before the will reading, Vivian called me. Her voice was syrupy, fake sweet. "Maya, darling, I just wanted to check in. You've been so quiet since the funeral. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said flatly. "Good. Listen. About tomorrow, the will reading. It's just a formality. I don't want you to be disappointed when... When what?" She paused. "When you realize your father's primary concerns were, well, the business, the legacy, Julian's future. You understand." "I understand," I said. "Wonderful. I knew you would. Family is so important, Maya. We have to stick together." "Absolutely," I said, and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my piano and played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the piece my father used to request every year on his birthday. My fingers moved over the keys, muscle memory and heartbreak, and I thought about every lie Vivian had told, every dismissive comment, every time she'd made me feel small. Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., Fulton County Courthouse. The probate hearing room was smaller than I'd expected. Wood-paneled, fluorescent lights, rows of chairs like a church. Vivian arrived with Julian and Sloane, all three of them in black, like they were still in mourning. Vivian saw me and smiled tightly. "Maya, I'm glad you came." I didn't answer. Susan Chen walked in moments later carrying 2 leather briefcases. She nodded at me, then took her seat at the attorney's table. The probate judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. "We're here for the reading of the last will and testament of Dr. Marcus Andrew Collins," she said. "Proceed, counsel." The first attorney, a man named Richard Pembroke representing Vivian, stood up. "Your Honor, the estate is relatively straightforward. Mr. Collins left the family business, Collins Financial Group, to his son, Julian Marcus Collins. The family home and remaining assets are bequeathed to his wife, Vivian Hayes Collins, as is standard in..." Objection. Susan Chen stood. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a blade. Pembroke blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Objection, Your Honor," Susan repeated. "The will Mr. Pembroke is referencing is outdated. Dr. Collins executed a revised will and irrevocable trust 8 months prior to his death, copies of which I'm submitting now to the court." She handed a stack of documents to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Vivian's face went white. That's not possible," she said, her voice rising. "Marcus never..." "Mrs. Collins," the judge said sharply, "you'll have your opportunity to speak. Be seated." Susan continued. "Your Honor, the revised documents clearly state that the family residence, the Steinway grand piano, all personal investment accounts, and a cash trust in the amount of $1.2 million are to be transferred to Dr. Collins's daughter, Maya Elizabeth Collins. The business goes to Julian Collins, as previously agreed. Mrs. Collins receives a one-time settlement of $200,000, and nothing further." The room exploded. Vivian shot to her feet. "This is fraud. He was sick. He wasn't in his right mind." "He was evaluated by 2 independent physicians," Susan said calmly, pulling more documents from her briefcase. "Both certified him as mentally competent. Their affidavits are attached." Pembroke was flipping through the documents, his face going red. "Your Honor, we were never informed of any changes to..." "Because you weren't his attorney," Susan interrupted. "I was, and Dr. Collins specifically requested that these changes remain confidential until after his passing to avoid interference." The judge read in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then she looked up. "These documents appear to be in order. The trust is irrevocable, properly witnessed, and notarized. Mrs. Collins, do you have evidence to the contrary?" Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He He loved me. That's not evidence, the judge said. Mr. Pembroke? Pembroke looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. No, Your Honor, we have no evidence. The judge closed the folder. Then the revised will and trust are upheld. The estate will be distributed as outlined. Court adjourned. The gavel fell, and Vivian screamed. It wasn't a word. It was just sound, raw and ugly, like something breaking. Julian grabbed her arm, trying to calm her down, but she shook him off and pointed at me. You, she hissed. You manipulated him. You turned him against me. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I didn't have to turn him against you, Vivian. You did that yourself. He was my husband. And I was his daughter, I said. His daughter. Not an afterthought, not a hobby, not someone you could erase with new paint and expensive furniture. He saw what you were doing, and he protected me. She lunged toward me, and Julian had to physically hold her back. We'll contest this, she spat. We'll take you to court. You'll lose, Susan said mildly, packing up her briefcase. The trust is airtight. You're welcome to try, but I'll bury you in legal fees before you get anywhere close to overturning it. Vivian stared at her, then at me, then at the judge. And then she turned and stormed out of the courtroom, Julian and Sloane scrambling after her. I stood there, alone, shaking so hard I had to sit back down. Susan sat beside me and put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said softly. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me. Thank your dad. He fought for you when it mattered. 3 weeks later, I walked into my father's house. My house, for the first time as its owner. Vivian had moved out, or more accurately, been escorted out by movers I'd hired to pack her things and deliver them to the Buckhead condo she'd rented in a fury. Julian had taken the business and wanted nothing to do with me. Fine. I didn't need him. Aunt Grace had called, crying, apologizing for not standing up at the dinner. I should have known, she kept saying. I forgave her. It wasn't her fault. The house was quiet, empty. All of Vivian's modern art was gone, her cream carpets ripped out, her chandeliers removed. I'd hired a team to restore it, to bring back the warm colors, the family photos, the feeling of home. And in the center of the living room, untouched, gleaming in the afternoon light, was the Steinway. I sat down at the bench, ran my fingers over the keys, and played the first notes of Moonlight Sonata. The sound filled the house, rich and deep and achingly beautiful, and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from the overwhelming, crushing, beautiful relief of being seen. 6 months later, I'm telling you this story from the front porch of that house. It's a Saturday morning. The magnolias are blooming. I've turned the downstairs study into a teaching studio. 5 students a week, all of them kids who can't afford lessons otherwise. I use part of the trust to fund scholarships. Dad would have liked that. Vivian sent me 1 email, 3 sentences. You stole my life. I hope you're happy. You'll regret this. I deleted it. Julian never reached out, not once. Aunt Grace comes over every Sunday for brunch. We sit in the garden and talk about Dad, about Mom, about the way families fracture and sometimes heal. I'm not telling you this story to teach you a lesson. Every family has its own wars, its own wounds. I can't tell you what to do with yours, but here's what I know now. Silence isn't agreement. I spent years being quiet, being polite, being the good stepdaughter who didn't make waves, and they took that silence and called it weakness. It wasn't. It was just a woman who hadn't found her proof yet. And the thing that saved me wasn't the money. It was the knowledge that my father saw me, really saw me, and loved me enough to plan 8 months ahead, to hire a lawyer, to build a fortress of legal protection, because he knew what was coming. That's the inheritance that changed my life. Not the house, not the piano, the knowledge that I was worth the trouble. I still teach piano. I still live modestly even though I don't have to. And every morning I sit at that Steinway and I play the songs my father loved. And I think about the girl I used to be, the one who thought hobbies weren't enough. She was enough. She was always enough. She just needed the paperwork to prove it. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, recognition, then it did exactly what I needed it to do. Hit like if it resonated. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And check the description below for another story I think you need to hear. I'm Maya Collins. And that was the last time I ever played quiet.